Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. I'm coming to you live here from Boston, Mass. Tony, you are, let me guess, I can tell from your vibe, you're in Western New York, right? Western New York.
Western New York vibe because I have long sleeves.
That's right. Yeah.
Florida.
Okay, it's 56 degrees here in Boston. Kangaroo time is actually going to the Red Sox game tonight. And we've sponsored, I've never been to Fenway. I've never been there. It's like that and Wrigley are my last two big ballparks. So
It's an amazing experience. And actually, if you get the hot lobster roll there, it's off the chart.
Oh, okay, good advice. Good advice. I was with Beth Cannon yesterday here. And it was so funny. She was on the craziest hunt for lobster bisque. And the concierge was like, yeah, there's lobster bisque, best lobster bisque in Boston, 2-mile walk that way. And she's like, yeah, I'll get my walk in. I'll get a 4-mile walk to and fro. She goes there and they're like, we don't have lobster bisques. We have chowder. We have chowder. We have clam chowder. So anyway, well, welcome everybody. Tony, one of my dear friends in the world of childcare, one of my mentors from the early days. We have history, man. We have some history. First of all, before we get started, I wanted to say we're thinking about you. Tony spends a little bit of his time down in Fort Myers, Florida, and in fact has many ties to South Florida. But just wanted to let you know we're thinking about you, and I know you're headed down there tomorrow to maybe clean some things up, but yeah. Thoughts and prayers, we're thinking about you.
Well, it's super appreciated. I actually, the headquarters of Inspire Care 360 is now in Florida, in Cape Coral, and the eye of the storm happened to roll over our headquarters. We're okay. Oh. We've survived it. Our neighbors, most of them didn't do well, and my heart goes out to them. So honestly, a lot of going down there is to evaluate sort of not only what's going on with our location, but is really to do whatever we can, So basically tomorrow I'm just rolling up. I will have short sleeves on and probably cargo pants, an ugly pair of them too. But I'll be there trying to help out all of our neighbors and seeing what we can do, because a lot of them, unfortunately, because the storm surge, had feet of water in their house. So yeah. My heart goes out to them. We also had Spark 2022, which was going to be at the Westin, and our premier sponsor, who is our platinum sponsor, is Kangaroo Time, who generously was joining us for the journey. And unfortunately, we're going to have to postpone it this time because the property, just a beautiful, pristine property, wonderful people over there. But yeah, we've got too many boats in the yard. Let's put it that way. It's just devastation all over. My heart goes out to the people. So thanks so much, Scott, for your words.
You're welcome. And Tony, if I can tell you anything, sometimes that delayed gratification when you're putting on your first event, sometimes it builds into really to a real value add, bounce this year was actually 2.5 years late, or 2 years later than we originally planned.
Yeah.
I'll say we were so fortunate to have sponsors like you guys who were like, hey, we believe in you. Whenever it happens, we're patient. But yeah, I'm really excited about Spark when it does happen. Yeah. And I think, let's keep it in Florida if we can. Let's go back. I did a national sales meeting in New Orleans in February 2006, and really the only reason we did it was we couldn't get our deposit back. But when we were there, we felt like we were part of the rebound there, and we felt like we were supporting a community that really needed us to be there. So anyway, let's jump in. So sorry, we're thinking about you. All I could think about when the eye of the storm was on all the the weather maps was, oh my God, I've been at Tony's house. He was hospitable enough to host me. and that thing's going to get hit. But all right, glad everybody's okay.
Yep.
But fingers crossed that, you know, healing and recovery and a bounce back is fast. So everybody, I'm Scott Wayman. I'm the founder and CEO here at Kangaroo Time. If you look at my shirt, it says my office smells like Cheerios. We are on the canal, the canal in the canal side area in Buffalo. And there are all these kind of big industrial buildings across the river from us. And every day our office smells like these sweet Cheerios and Lucky Charms because General Mills has their factory right there. So it always smells good. And anyway, it's branded. Our crack marketing team is the best. We're here at a trade show and everybody here has been like, okay, dude, what's up with your shirt? So it's
I
done its
probably
job,
would
Marissa.
I probably would gain 30 pounds just smelling that every day.
It
Just
does,
that
yeah,
much.
it does something to the hunger hormone, Tony, when you smell it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting fatter just thinking about it. All right, so I've got with me Tony DiAgostino, founder and CEO of Inspired Care 360. We're super excited you're joining us today for our discussion. We're going to be talking about trends we're seeing around staffing and center economics. But before we get it started, let's talk a little bit about housekeeping. So Marissa's recording this. You will get an email link. We usually post these on YouTube soon after the webinar is over, and you will be getting a certificate for attending. If you have any questions, please click in the Zoom interface, the Q&A button, and nest or post a question there, and Tony and I will get to it. Or if it's just to compliment my shirt, you know, you can just put that in chat. If you're new to our webinars, just know that Kangaroo Time is an all-in-one childcare management platform that helps centers all around the world optimize their businesses. We help you manage billing, invoicing, staff scheduling, attendance tracking, all your reporting, and so much more. We're building new products all the time. Visit kangarootime.com if you have any questions or want to learn more. So a little bit about Tony. Tony is the founder of IC360, which is an amazing business that you all need to know about. It's a childcare management company, I guess, sort of, but it's more than that. It's more than that, in my opinion. It's hard to describe IC360 in a tagline. So they support ECE schools and childcare businesses who want their businesses to be more sophisticated, highly efficient, and grow profitability. So, Tony, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And yeah, I'll give you a little more detail on that. Thanks so much for having me, Scott. Scott had the opportunity to say some nice things about me, but Scott has been really instrumental, I think, in this industry overall. He's been instrumental in helping the industry move the needle forward beyond just Kangaroo Time. And for that reason, him and I have had some really wonderful dynamic conversations. And as Inspired Care 360 has continued to grow and develop, I've watched Kangaroo Time do the same, and I've been very impressed. Inspired Care 360, you know, the way we like to position it is, you know, we are for you what you are for your kids at your school. We are that backup. We are that support. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on the back office. Kangaroo Time has really nailed the childcare management software space and really has keep on expanding into really, you know, different things. And I just saw a new email come out, Scott, about your drop-in scheduling and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a lot of very cool things that you guys are always doing. What we basically do falls into three buckets at Inspired Care 360. And I'm not going to make this much long of a pitch or anything, but it's in engaging your staff, because we believe the staff is the secret sauce. At the end of the day, if you've got good people and they're on board with you, that's 95% of the battle. So engaging your staff, helping you grow your revenue, and then helping you optimize to profitability. Do you know on average that childcare owners make only about 5 to 10% margin on their business? And that can easily be driven upwards of 30% margin. And so what we do is we really help with the training and the development, the HR. We have a healthcare solution that's highly affordable and flexible, as well as different things that help you understand what your reputation, your brand is, and how to build it, how to protect it, how to grow it, and then how to optimize that revenue. So we do that all within a membership. And that's why we work so well with KT and the people over there. And so beyond Scott, also I give a shout out to Marissa too. You'll see her name all over the place. She's an amazing gal and our team loves working with her.
Thank you. I'm flattered. I'm more than flattered. I'm embarrassed, Tony. I'm embarrassed.
Okay, so we've had this Barney Fest. I love you, you love me.
Yeah.
Is
Okay,
anybody else
let's
gonna
get
get
in.
anything out of this thing?
All right, let's talk about a few of our one of our topics today. So, Tony, you've been an operator for how many years in the childcare space?
So 12 years I've operated schools, and I have been operating them through thick and thin. I've had up to 6 locations, some of them that are highly focused with social services and CACFP, as well as others that are just purely private pay. So I do sort of have the spectrum.
And you and I have similar backgrounds. We started in kind of like Fortune 500 companies early in our careers, like many people getting out of college, and you go and you get the job, and then you kind of learn. You and I were very similar in that I think we were hustlers in our careers, and all this, and it just dawned on both of us like, oh, we should probably go start a business. We should probably be entrepreneurs. Um, so I look at a business, I look at a business and I immediately start thinking about how to operate it. I walk into Burger King, and I'm like, I'm wanting to go snap people into shape, and like, oh, this could be over here. You just always thinking about it. I talk to my friends. I'm downstairs at this conference, and I'm chewing on people talking about their childcare centers and their businesses. You and I have always had these great conversations, but for you, the topic of center economics, when you talk about like the critical levers in a childcare business, what are they? What are the center economic hot buttons for you?
It's a great question. It really is, because it's an easy question in the sense of asking, but it's a very thoughtful question in the sense of, when I first started, as to what I think now, they're definitely different. And it comes with experience. Many of the people in our audience today have probably varying degrees of experience. But what I know is that the key hot button issues at first was I sort of let things play out according to what hit us. So in other words, we were very reactive when we started. And what I mean by reactive is, we had a school, we had teachers, we had curriculum, we had a program, and people came to us. And if things went good for us, great. If things didn't go good for us, we we're like, what's happening? Why is this not going well? But what we started to do is we started to, where I think the beyond the secret sauce of the staff, the real back end thing was, we started focusing on numbers, and data was absolutely critical to us. When we look at that, what does that mean? There's one thing when we look at revenue, and we looked at revenue, coming in and expense money going out, and that at the most basic level is how you survive in a business, a small business. But what we do is, like, every single week, I get together with my directors in my schools too, because of having those schools. And what we do is we go through all of our pertinent numbers, from the number of enrollments we have today, to the number of seats we have available, to when we're actually going to be filling those seats, what waiting lists we have, what do we have with upcoming opportunities, as well as challenges that are going to affect the numbers. And then we look at what is it that those numbers all compile to, that start providing us a roadmap. And that roadmap really allows us to make a lot of decisions from. So having solid data for us has been important in the empirical way that we've managed our business.
Tony, there's something I learned. So I started my career right out of college at 22. Every step along the way, um, I've had like this kind of like very obvious insight that I really didn't pick up on until I became a founder or until I became CEO at Kangaroo Time. So I'd already been through another company, long career, leadership, executive level type, you know, experience. And I had another founder say to me, "Hey, as the CEO, you have three jobs. You have only three jobs. One is to set the vision, two is to go find the best people, and then three is to capitalize the company." And with that vision part, I didn't realize how simplistic or really how unsophisticated you have to that approach is, right?
Mhm.
If ever in my businesses, if ever I start to just chant a mantra of one thing over and over to our team, hey guys, we need to raise our NPS, we need to raise our NPS, we need happy customers, we need happy customers. That's what seems to get the most attention, right? Um, how do you I know you sit down with directors every week, and really run through those. I think that's interesting. I think there is this school of thought that the finance side of the childcare center, when you really dig into profitability, there's
Mhm.
something to be shrouded there or maybe private, but it's absolutely the opposite. You want
Yeah,
everybody knowing every number.
yeah. Well, that's sort of, I don't know, it's a mixed message. And I'll give you an example why. Information is very powerful in our organization. I clearly remember one time, probably about 7 years ago, in our journey, that I had an infant teacher walk into my office and saying, she needs a raise. And I said, okay, fair enough. Tell me sort of what you've done. You've done okay over this period of time and you've brought value to us. Tell me why you need what is it that you believe you have a raise? Because always open eared and always want to help. And she honestly could definitely use a raise. She asked for a $5 an hour raise, which was probably a little more than I was willing to dispatch. But the reason she said it is because I know how much you charge infant teachers for a child here, and you're getting to keep all that money. And I said, well, so now we need an education. And this is where we get to when, on one hand, I wholeheartedly agree with the statement you just made, Scott, because there's a lot of times where our teammates don't understand sort of the economics of the business, of how the actual business runs. They don't realize that there is rent, that there's utilities, that there's something cost in advertisement and marketing and all the other things, and investing in your childcare management software, investing in your back office solutions, all those things. So we sat down and we talked a while about that. And she was a smart lady. She got that aha moment. She understood that all the money wasn't sort of going into our coffers. Matter of fact, a lot of it goes as quickly out the back door as it comes into the front door.
Absolutely.
So, but the education was very valuable. On the other hand, too, though, we've had some experience in the past too, where when people see numbers, sometimes they only see what they want to see. And that's part of the challenge. And I'm just being sort of just straight up experience.
Tony, this is
My own
real.
experience.
This is
Yeah.
real. This isn't
Yeah.
what the business books say. This is real life.
This is exactly how it is. And so what you do is you share with people, say, yeah, well, we brought in this revenue here. And then no matter how much you explain the expenses going out the door, they just don't see that. And for some reason, there is not a desire. They're like, well, wait a minute, we need more of that. And I'm like, well, if you realize in some situations when our enrollments were at some points very low, more, even though revenue was coming in, there was a lot more money going out the door. So we were unprofitable for periods of time.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult for them. And then you have to be very careful, because if they think that you're unprofitable, your staff have the viability of saying, hey, listen, I don't want to be part of this anymore. I want to be with someone who's profitable. So there's a little bit of a double-edged sword that we've recognized in the way that we communicate for our staff as well as to our families about, how we run our business and what we do. We try to be very open and we try to be candid, but we also have learned, and even our families have said to us, sometimes it's best to not over communicate to us. Sometimes it's best to tell us exactly what we need at that moment and just leave it at that. And because they're like, because if not, then you have us all thinking about questions that we have to ask you. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want those questions. So
Yeah. Yeah. And Tony, I do think it's an important lesson in context too. Like if you're just, if it's very obvious that the business is super, super profitable and money is going into, money is going into somebody's wallet or whatever. I I think, there's always the conversation around growth. And yeah, we want to have a really healthy, profitable business. That's the hallmark of stability and equilibrium. Like profitability is good. And having employees paid at market is also good. You can throw a company out of balance by having pay scales that are all rickety because you have some weird arrangements. So,
yeah,
and again, if people can't get on board with that, um, you make them a cake and we celebrate their next chapter, right? Like
yeah.
it's okay. It's okay.
And that sort of leads into, to something that's important to me too, is the culture you define. There's been a lot of talk about culture of businesses, but what you were sort of bringing up is, you make them a cake and you celebrate the opportunity to move on. You're basically saying. So I think there's a quick way of saying you get rid of their ass. No, I'm just saying that what you are, really talking to, Scott, is you're trying to find people who can jump on the vision of not only you as the sort of the leader of the organization, but the other wonderful people you brought on who like teach me every day. I have a wonderful two team members who are out with you over in Boston, and they're just amazing people. And not only we learn from them, but if they, along with myself and others, have a culture in our organization, and you have people who want to always either pull it down or pull it in a separate direction, it really becomes a challenge to then manage your business by the numbers, because it is a blend of what the people you have as well as what you're really trying to achieve with those numbers. So let me ask you this, Scott. You went from an organization that I would say probably, I know for at least 2 years ago, gosh, you were probably about, you know, 20 to 30 employees. And now you're at how many?
Right at 100.
That's
Right at 100.
that's amazing. That shows that you've grown tremendously. You've grown greatly. What growing that quick over that period of time, what has done that, to your psyche and your processes of how you think about your business? There's a lot of people I know also who are probably on this call too, that might be looking at, I want to bring on additional locations, which are, immediately absorbing additional staff. There's different cultures, things of that nature. Now, I don't think you guys acquired anybody, but you've organically hired these people. What was going on in your mind when you were growing as rapidly and doing your very best to get everybody on the same page?
Yeah, it's a great question because I feel like Kangaroo Time has been this like it's been this interesting stroke of like really good elements coming together, like lightning in a bottle almost, just one of those once in a lifetime things. So what I'm super terrified about and and what I'm standing up systems to preserve is that we have a great culture. We have a culture where everybody everybody has a real fire and passion for what we're doing to serve our customers. And there's no bullshit, man. Like everybody in our organization is on fire for what they want to do. You know, I don't love Steve Jobs all the time, but Steve Jobs did say, he has one statement that I really like, and he said, you know, nothing will frustrate an A player any more than having to work with a bunch of C players. And you know, essentially, if somebody is just high octane and a hummingbird on crack, you know, just somebody that's just like a taskmaster, really efficient at what they do, you can't saddle them with people that aren't. Um, and there are a bunch of elements to this. So we had to really kind of like look at, okay, what is our hiring process and break that out. And Tony, we've talked about this. We hire for two qualities. Um, high fluid intelligence. So the ability to pick up rule sets very, very fast. And then the second one is kindness. We feel like if we get the right blend of those two things, we can put people in places to really advance the product, to really advance support, to really kind of like make deals happen. We feel like with those two qualities. So it starts with hiring. So we started doing diagnostic testing in the hiring phase. And then onboarding became a science for us, or it has. We're getting better at it. You know, everything in our onboarding process is now really, really thoughtful and planned out. So when a new employee starts, we have this children's book that's called The Story of Kangaroo Time. So, and you open it up and there's a picture of me. And by the way, I'm way more buffed out than the guy that the illustrator drew. Like, I think I've done a good job. And that guy looks kind of flabby in the children's book. But it's the story of KT.
What was that? Was that the guy right there? I don't know if you could see. Is that him?
You're about right on. I'll have to get Marissa to share a screenshot, but
not exactly the most jacked photo of you, but
all in our culture book. And so everybody receives a copy of the culture book, and the culture book tells a story of, you know, really kind of like the grace that I had with family willing to loan me money, with just luck from people like you and mentors. And then it talks about our values, you know, kindness, resilience, integrity, thoughtfulness. And well, I forgot one of our values. What a great CEO here. But it just goes through thinking, and it displays our values. And then I write every new employee a letter and just kind of like pour it on thick, thanking them that they would take this precious time in their career to come and work for us. And then we make sure their computer is ready to go. Like, we want their onboarding experience. We want them to start that day at work and just be magical. We want them. And in fact, we had an employee say the other day, a new employee, they said, you know, this place is like Disneyland. It is incredible. And it nearly made me cry. So really like focusing so hard on the details and loving on our people so much to welcome them into a culture where they can explore intellectual curiosity, where nobody in that environment would ever go to the water cooler and bitch about what a dick the CEO is, or, you know, like we want people to really be fired up about their time at KT.
But let me ask you this, okay? So there's something that I think you said that is absolutely sort of a dream thing, because not only was it like a sort of a, you made the comment about Steve Jobs, and I'm very similar in scope, that he has some very prolific sayings and very good things, and some other things I wouldn't fully agree with. But I also think, you know, another, you know, entrepreneur, you know, was Bill Gates, who often said, you know, I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I want to keep on hiring the smartest guys in the room.
Yeah.
How do you handle a situation when you are hiring these highly intelligent people, you know, but they come in and they're like, well, I sort of know more than Scott, and Scott really doesn't understand where he's going. And you're like, no, I really do know where I'm going. But, you know, there's a level of conflict because they've either been there and done that, or they're maybe not on the same level with you of understanding what your vision is. and they can't get there. And I know, other than sort of separating, taking advantage of that, how do you handle those kind of individuals who really have that brilliance, but sometimes don't have the alignment?
You know, I take maybe my approach here is very kind of hands off. I've always had this feeling that if I'm noble and earnest about 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 what I want a new employee to do, and just kind of like give them some framework, that kind of like that possessiveness of let's do it my way. I know you have some great ideas. I don't do that. I don't trade in that because I feel like it does stunt some really productive um some really productive time from an employee. When you hire really smart people, these people really want to run their playbook. And it when you quell or squash that sort of enthusiasm or zealousy, I think you go further backwards. Now, again, one of the reasons I think we try to really focus on the company values is so that that person who's high octane, a hummingbird on crack, they can go and run and stay aligned with what we're trying to accomplish as a company. So, again, I as I've aged, as I get into my late 40s, and I've done this a while, I think I've kind of learned the value of letting people really kind of become independent and carry things out. Like, in fact, since we've gotten to this level, this is probably the most quality of life I've had in 7 years. Because we actually now have a head of finance, and
Yeah.
I'm no longer crying over an open QuickBooks screen with my wife. We have like all the framework built around our revenue operations. So we're not doing crazy stuff like sending out invoices we typed. Also, like, we have great people like Marissa who now stand up our initiatives with awareness and the brand and everything. So I don't have to do that. And again, Tony, I couldn't imagine like really having to like uh corral anybody or pull them back. Not to say that it never happens. Sometimes it's youthful exuberance and enthusiasm and excitement. But I'll tell you, Tony, when I was at my first startup, I'll never forget the founder there, and he admitted it later. I wrote a copy for a brochure that we needed for a trade show the next day, and I met with the graphical artist, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "How could you? Why did you do this? You didn't get it approved by me." And I just kind of like, I was getting on an airplane about to fly 6 hours from LA to Boston. I'm like, F this guy. And so I just hung up on him. I said, you know what? At least we have a brochure for the trade show. And I got on the plane, and this was back before they had Wi-Fi on the
Yeah.
planes. And by the time I landed, I had like 4 voicemails saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, I overstepped. And by the way, it looks really good." And then I earned myself the job. I did probably like 100 more brochures. So I gave myself more work basically. But it was just one of those examples of I wanted to fly. I wanted to
Right.
do something great for the company, and it was accretive, it was value add. So I think there's a balance.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think of my schools, I think of Inspire Care 360, which are different. I think Inspire Care 360 is the back office solution, like Kangaroo time. We're similar cloths are cut there. The schools themselves have the interesting dynamics, as we know. You must be in ratio. You must meet the regulations of licensing. There's a lot of musts, sanitation, you must handle this way. So there's a lot of, in those industries, well, in the childcare, Montessori, Reggio school space, we've got a lot of things that have been predefined for us. We got
Yeah.
high guardrails, you know, where what we do in our software companies and our, our cloud solutions and what have you, we have a little more, latitude to go, and which is very helpful.
But
So I
Tony,
would,
even when I was managing brick and mortars,
yeah,
yeah, the task orientation around those obligatory things like cleanliness and ratios and things like that, that's where I felt like I could provide crazy framework to assure that we had redundancy built in. That, I used to do a thing at my first job called the hour of power, to where for 1 hour, let's say we had 4 employees or 4 salespeople, I would split it up into 15 minutes. And in the hour of power, I would pull everybody's contracts and bring them in. And for the first time in anybody's career, ticket by ticket, sales transaction by sales transaction, we talked about every single deal. Hey, what happened here? Yeah, I was in a hurry. We didn't have the right product for the customer. So I didn't feel like I could sell anything to them. Okay, cool. Well, how can we help you next time? Um, I do think there is some mentorship there and some servant leadership that can really help performance in those task orientation type duties.
yeah, I would not disagree at all. I would agree with that. Matter of fact, I think that where you were going with bringing in that talent, I think that there's a real opening within our schools. Quite often, we sometimes look at filling the spot, but not looking at advancing the spot as much, just because there have been such a lack of talent out there that sometimes we're just looking to get it filled, which is super difficult because we all know that we want people in there who are creative. But when we do look at it, I think the successes that I have seen with ours is when we do bring someone in, it's like everything else. I think if we set up front the ground rules, clear expectations, this is sort of the field that we're all playing on. This is what these people have to do and these people have to do. And with you, we're bringing you in because of the talent, the things that you can do. So we don't want you to fall into place. We want you to expand. We want you to look at creativity. We want you to bring those ideas to us. And we don't, but I'll be very honest. I recently had some person that every time she brought something to me, it just made me jerk back and go, I thought it's very radical. Everything was radical. And I was like, it got to the point where I was like, and I'll protect the innocent. So I'll just call her Jane. But but I was saying, I love your ideas, but we also have to build up to some of these things because a lot of them are very out there. And I'm like, so how do we get there? Just let me know how you think we can get there. So it had her being introspective and being thoughtful. And then when she was introspective and thoughtful, she would tell me those ideas. And then I had an opportunity to coach with her more and say, so now working with your teammates, how do you get them to also see your vision for where you want to go? And then she had to think about a lot more. And when she came back, she started realizing what was actually doable as to what were things that were probably not worth the investment just yet. And I think it was that kind of maybe a coaching culture that we've had that has really allowed us to take advantage of some of those people. So it's interesting to see how you've set up your structure for your company and how you've really grown from that and the way that we're also trying to do it and trying to achieve it.
Tony, I've got a question for you. So there's a speaker here, you know him very, Thad Joyner,
Yeah, yeah,
Thad and you should
that well.
do something together. Thad talks a lot about uh incentives
Yeah.
and really like especially at the director level. How do you feel about really interesting incentives in the world of pay, like a percentage of profits and, some variable compensation as a motivator? And how do you feel about that as a driver of behavior? I know there's different schools of thought, but I'm just curious as to what
Yeah.
you think.
Actually, it was funny because I was presenting at a conference with Thad this past spring, and he went on right before me. And the first thing he said is, pay your directors more, pay them a lot more. Don't
Yeah,
pay them a little more, pay them a
a
lot.
lot.
Yeah.
I mean, a magnitude of like 3x
Yeah.
in some cases.
And honestly, when I heard that, I was like, well, that's nice to have kind of situation. But I also looked at the practicality of it. And there is value in motivating from financial for sure. And I'm sure that we have, even on this call, there's some directors going, I should be paid more. I plain and simply should. And you very well possibly should, and I'm a big believer of, always prove to whoever your superior is or whoever the leader of that organization or that owner is, you need to demonstrate and talk to them about the value that you add to the organization. And I think that you should have commensurate pay with what you do for that organization and even the potential to get more pay for doing it. We've done bonuses in the past in my schools. Every time we've done bonuses, and I don't know why, the directors don't focus on achieving them. They just haven't. They're not cut of that cloth like you and myself. You could tell at some point in time, we've been in some level of sales.
Oh yeah.
You could tell that we are, the reason we started companies is because, necessity is the mother of invention. We find that there's a problem out there and we're like, you know what, there's a way to possibly solve this. Let me go out and figure that out. So we're at the heart, there are a lot of problem solvers who I think those problem solvers are also love opportunity for reward. But I do think that with our directors too, we do have different type of individuals in those roles. Some of those directors, if I was to ask them, they would say that financial compensation is absolutely important. They have a family, blah, 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 absolutely important. Others, though, would often, that I've talked to, they're like, you know what I could use instead of having more comp is I want to be able to watch my kids' baseball game. I want to go to my daughter's soccer game or to her rehearsals. I want to be able to do this. And I think for our directors to get really finite here, I think it's super important for us to understand what makes them happy and what does quality of life mean to them. Not what it means to me, not what it means to Scott, not what it means to Thad, but what it means to them of what's important. We do something that I rolled out, gosh, now about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's called the happiness interview. And the happiness interview is something that we do that, a lot of times we've done exit interviews when people leave. This is the milk has already been spilled. The person's already out the door. They're already on the way to their next job, or the family has left our school and they're already on to their next school or wherever they're going to. And then we do an exit interview and find out, why'd you leave? What was the root cause? I know you don't want to tell us, but please tell us so we can get better. The happiness interview is really to sit down with all of your teammates and say, what really makes you happy? Why are you actually with us still? What is it about the role that you have? And sometimes you find out things you don't want to know. Like, well, I'm really not that happy. I've actually started looking for something. But you know what? You're at a point in time when you're having this conversation, you're now able to really have a conversation about that person. What are they aspiring for? Is it financial? Do we need to get to a certain financial mark? Is it something where they need more flexibility? Do they need more quality of life? Do they need something where, if they had more benefits or different type of benefits because they've been really struggling with that? Maybe it's something where, the spouse doesn't have a car that works and now they're both sharing a car and they're like, you know what? I know, Tony, you have me driving to the different schools, but it really is a challenge for us. So me being able to maybe lease an automobile for them solves their issue way more than just giving them some extra money or a bonus that might be a one-time thing. So to me, the happiness interview has gone forward. We do it quarterly with all of our staff. And matter of fact, if someone is interested in getting one of those, just type a chat out, because Sarah, our amazing marketing person, is on here too. And Sarah will definitely get you a link as to how to get a free happiness interview that we've done in the past. But I think my answer overall, sorry, in a very long way, Scott, to get to your answer about that, I don't think it's about overpaying as much as it's about understanding. It's really about understanding that everybody's an individual who works for you, and the relationship between an individual is what's the most important. It's not just buying them, it's really understanding where it's at. When I was working for Ernst and Young, back in the day, one of the things we sat down, I remember a bunch of consultants, and I was getting, paid ridiculous dollars working in Manhattan for that back in the day, which was great. But someone stood up and said something that was just very simple. And they said, they just talked about relationships, and they were talking about relationships with clients, but it really applies to relationships in life, whether it be friendships like the friendship you and I have, whether it be with our significant others, whether it be with the employees we have, whether it be with family members. And they just simply said, relationships never are standing still. They're either moving forward in a positive way or they're moving negative. They're never standing still. And the question that I have for the people in the audience, for them, sort of this reflective question, is when you look at your directors, or your directors are looking at your staff, where is your individual relationship with each one of them? Are they moving closer to you, or are they moving away? And how do you know? And is it going to solve it by just paying them 3 or 4 times more the amount? Or does that possibly even take away from where the relationship is? So the key is, are people worth their pay? Absolutely. I wish I could pay everybody everything I could. I also need to stay
Yeah.
in business, though, because in childcare, the margins are so thin. I know that, Thad has done well with a few of his schools. I know he's invested in some other ones. And so I I look to that guy and say, there's a true entrepreneur who's got a very unique way, who is really sort of, exploring new opportunities in our field and doing a great job of it. For myself, I want to know more about the person.
Yeah. And I think Thad is really good at offense. Like, I think he's really good at the revenue side of the business. So I think for him, he can find the right person that aligns with him and build all the incentives off of, you know, gassing up the offense. So speaking of that, Tony, if I were to give you a center right now that was in shambles
Yep.
and say, here's the keys, bud, here's the keys. What levers do you pull first?
Well, as I mentioned before, staff is the secret sauce right up front. So the very first thing that we would do is honestly nothing other than listen. We would come in and we would first listen. We would listen with our ears open. We would try to understand history. We would listen to each staff member. We would sit down and we would listen to parents. We try to understand, and not only understand what the history's been with them, but if you were handing me the keys, you just sold me that school over in Buffalo, I now have that Cheerio smell going right up, right up our nose every day. I would also say this, what is your perception of what's going to happen with this acquisition? Because quite often when I've acquired businesses, and I acquired my 6th school after I acquired 5, one of the things that I didn't listen to, or I didn't hear, or I maybe didn't want to hear, was I listened to staff, and they told us all about their job and how well they were doing in their job. We listened to parents, and they said, well, we chose this because it's a high quality school, and this is a hallmark kind of school in this part of town, and Pittsford, New York, and what have you. But what I didn't really ask is, what is your perception of new management coming in, new ownership being? Because that was a bit of a downfall. It was a downfall because they were like, well, you're a guy, and if you're a guy in this industry, well, that means that you only want to take advantage of people because you're a businessman and you only want to make money. And it'd be amazed how quick that was said to me time and again. Before, we didn't touch any levers. So you talk about the levers to change, we just walked in the door. But I didn't realize that that was sort of the B reel. That was what was going on in the background, was this is not going to be good because he's a guy. And I think a lot of that has changed since then, because there's been a lot more guys who are now involved in the industry, and they know their heart goes out to the development of these children. But I will say that the first thing was to listen, but to understand, because if I was able to understand that too, it would allow me to better position what my values are as to what their values are and how we're going to look at blending those values together. So after we listen, after we understand, then is to evaluate what I was just getting to is values. And that is, you mentioned them earlier. You started mentioning your values for your organization, how important it was for hiring for your values. For us, whether it be families coming in, whether it be the hiring, whether it be just what we live by, it's really like what's important to us. So, our values are about, with my schools is about trust. It's about being authentic. It's about being a learning culture. It's about being part of the community. It's about having fun. Those values are really important to us, but we also live by them because not only do we recruit by those, not only do we talk to families about those, we also talk about the fact that those values are absolutely critical, that if you're going to get promoted or go anywhere, that you're living by them. So long story short, Scott, I think is that the key lever is to start understanding who can be on board with your values as the first lever, and then start focusing on taking advantage of those individuals and looking to replace people who really don't want to be part of that. Because if they don't want to be part of it, and this is something I think we both learned out of our corporate years, because when I was young in my corporate years, I would come in and I'd watch how a new vice president would come in, and then he would fire everybody in the department, and then he would hire all of his cronies. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that seems unfair to all those people who've been working so hard. But then you start realizing after you run your own company, why does that happen? Well, why it happens is because they don't want to spend the next 6 months to a year fighting with people that don't share their same values. And if they're in charge, if they've been given the, the reign to come in and say, I need to move the needle on this area, and then they don't have the people who are on board with them to do that, they're never going to do it. So you have to bring in the people that have like-minded values. And sometimes those values, again, are not going to be just yours. They're going to you have to understand what the values of your customer you serve are, as well as the values of your staff, and see where you come together.
Tony, we worked with an avid acquirer in the childcare space. You and I know all the brands and the logos that they acquire centers. They have a sourcing mechanism. They're like M&A, corp dev, you know, they're acquirers. One of the executives at that company told me, he said, when we buy a brand, when we go in and buy a brand, and let's say it's like a family run brand, or like a, long-term operators had been there, what he said was, the moment that they come in, people freak out, right? Like they freak out and they're like, oh God, the overlord Tony is coming in. He's going to buy us. He's going to can all of us. And then also the families are kind of like, what happened to this little kitschy brand that we love, this regionalized brand? He says that they've kind of baked into their model that the center performance on the revenue side will drop by about 25 to 30% from day one to month 18. So along that journey, it will do this. And then once they kind of like, they go through this long cycle of replacing staff, what you're telling me is when you've done acquisitions, you have a playbook for kind of creating some equilibrium for the changeover, right?
Yeah, it's finding a balance, because it is important not to rock the apple cart too much, though, because your families will just bail on you, plain and simple. Your families won't tolerate a ton. But if you do it in a very active, transparent way to families of why you're doing it, what you're trying to achieve, and where you're going with it, okay, it behooves you so much more, from my experience, to have those open communications with families than to have, after 2 months of it, people starting to fall off and be upset and talking to parents like, I can't believe this guy Scott, or I can't believe this guy Tony, as the owner of the company, he's doing this to you, and did you know he's doing this to you, all that sort of negative vibe, because they were not on board to start with. Okay, so it is tough because you can't, there's not a perfect science of defining how to work with those individuals, but you can clearly see that if people are like, no, I don't agree with you, that's not somewhere I want to go, like you said early on in this conversation, is let's start baking the cake for them. Let's start allowing them to know that, hey, listen, life is about you being happy. And part of it is if you're going to be in the company and you're not happy, honestly, it may not be the right fit for you. So let's start baking the cake, you know? So that's, I guess, my point of view with it is that I do think as part of my playbook that if I was to take on that school, it is to look at getting the right team members in place, but not just randomly getting rid of people, because it's so tough to find good people.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up, Tony, one of the I gotta ask you because here I always do I do my talks. Um, Today was the first time. Okay, so I think I did my first content or my first talk in February 2021. I asked, how many of you are struggling with staffing? Everybody in the room raise their hand. This particular group, maybe it's just different. This was the group that a majority of the people did not raise their hand. How have you looked? Maybe times are changing, but how have you done with staffing, and what are your mechanisms for success?
So, great question. So there's a stat out there in our industry that if individuals who are with you in their first year have a 42% chance of turnover in this childcare industry, it drops to 23% in their second year, and it goes to 8% in the third year. So that means you have half a chance of turnover if you can get them to year two. And then it drops to a very amiable number of 8% when you get to year three. So the objective is how do you really get people to stay with you? And what we have learned,
Or even more so, Tony, like how do you get that past that magical mark of 1 year?
yeah, well, and so how do you get that magical mark 1 year? Because you cut your risk in half, right?
Yeah.
So part of it, again, recruiting on values, what have you. But the biggest thing that I believe is people go to places where they feel like they belong. And, why do people like to be part of fraternities? Why do they like to be part of clubs? Why are they part of gangs? People go to these entities because they want to belong. They want to be with like-minded people. They spend more time at our schools or at Kangaroo Time or Inspired Care 360 than they do with their families.
Absolutely.
So do you want to spend all this time with where you don't feel like you belong? So to me, we've cut down our turnover down to about 15%. So if I look at the number of W-2s I've had in my schools, at the end of the year, year to year, outside of seasonal and college kids who work for us, we actually have about a 15% turnover, where the industry has about 10% turnover.
That's incredible.
Now it is, but I am also going to tell you, we still have another problem that we're trying to solve. I'm actually doing a webinar in a couple of weeks too, and we'll get it out to you, and I'm sure Marissa will share it. But
Good,
what
good.
we're doing a panelist, sort of like we're doing here. But we've had this weird thing happen in the industry, which I'm very interested that the owners out there, when you asked about raising hands, they didn't. But I'm not sure if they were answering this question. We've had so many people come and interview, and we go, oh, we love this person, they're great. They sat there for 2 to 3 hours, filled out all the paperwork that has to go to licensing, has to go to the state, has to go to this, background checks, everything, 2 to 3 hours. And then they don't show up for the first day of work. We get completely ghosted. And we're like, wait a minute, you just why did you spend the time? If you didn't want to, tell us ahead of time. Or just call or text us or tell us you're not even going to come in. So we've still had this happen a lot. And honestly, I think that you know, and I know we're coming near the end of our time here. I think that the challenge that we're really dealing with is a different world of communication that we have yet to solve. So as we're starting to understand how to retain people, which is great, and I think we've done very well with it because we make them feel like they belong, because they do belong. We really focus on what does it take for them to feel like they belong by getting them on board quicker, making sure that they're educated quicker, maybe make sure that we're all paddling in the same direction at the same time. All those things we're doing, so when that person is on board, that they are staying longer because they feel like they're truly belong. That's working. The thing that's not working for me yet, and we're really trying to solve, is how do we get those people that we've been interviewing to actually come and actually show up and actually become present enough time so we can help them feel and understand why they belong. So we're really struggling with that, Scott. And I think, you know, I've watched, listen, like everybody else, I've watched videos, I've watched TikToks, I've watched, you know, these other things. And there's something that's going on today about how you should just ghost your employer, how you should just not show
Tony,
up, or all this
I have a
stuff.
thesis on this. I have a thesis.
Sure.
I think we are entering into a stage of the life cycle of the workforce. I think for so long people could just kind of stay home and collect stimulus dollars and unemployment. And then I think there's like this little bit of, we're in this stage of, maybe I should dip my toe back in the water and go back to work. And then maybe that process of filling out the application and actually being gainfully employed spooks them. I think this is very, very kind of like timely and life cycle.
Yeah.
But okay, man, do this again. I love
Yeah.
this. I love it.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for joining. You, as always, have the best insights. Again, we are thinking about you. Good luck. Safe travels tomorrow.
I appreciate it.
Fingers crossed. I'd love to see a text with good news on it.
Yeah.
Maybe a picture or two. But thank you, brother. We really appreciate it. Thank you for everything, your friendship, and best of luck with everything, Tony. Been awesome to have you, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much, Scott. Appreciate you and your team. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
See you, man. Take
Cheers,
care.
everybody.